So I've been working on the theming layer. So if you go into the shadcn kit file right now, you can switch from light to dark mode. Seems to be a bit heavy on the computer, even though I have a pretty fast computer. It doesn't switch immediately, so you have to wait a bit. If I go back to dark, you will see that every component will basically have applied like all these like semantic layers. So one flaw would be that if one of the components doesn't have a semantic layer. So let's see if we can try and simulate this flaw by looking like at like all the components and then doing show selection colors. And then we would be seeing like, for example, this white here, but sometimes the white is on purpose. But also here we have like a neutral 500. So let's see like where that is going on, the neutral 500. And it seems to be a border, but also here in the placeholder, it seems to be a like a text value. Now in general, neutral 500 is actually not so bad because it's in the middle of the spectrum, but it seems this input OPT has some problems. For example, this red 500 should actually be the destructive border. This placeholder should actually be the muted foreground. And what you will see, and you have to be careful when you do this, is that muted foreground, if it maps to 500, great, but something might map to 600 or 400, and then a color change might occur. And if you change the color, then you also have to check it against shadcn itself. So one layer that is left is this neutral 900. This is a bit of an annoying one because I think that's the one that I use contrast for, where essentially it's the other color. So in dark mode, it's white, and in light mode, it's black. So that's one of those consistency checks you can do, where you basically select a component and you look into this white and you see like, okay, what is actually white here? And in the case of like a destructive badge, we know that the color will always be a sort of darker red background, some form of red. So it's fine to use like explicit white here. Or we could introduce another foreground variable. And talking about the variables, it's a bit difficult to understand. So we added a lot of documentation. So this should actually say in general use foreground for text and icons. So like the thing is that shadcn uses this system where there's this layer called background and there's this layer called foreground. And then if it says muted, what they actually mean is muted background, but not, well, they just don't say it. It's not in the variable name. So if you go to theming on the website, you will see that it says somewhere down the logic, it says convention. We use a simple background and foreground convention for color. Background is used for the background color and the foreground variable is used for the text color. So if you have like this list of variables here, what I try to do is that I try to map this to correctly to the light and dark layer. For example, background here, that is OKLCH1. So foreground, that is OKLCH 0.145. But how do we know like which tailwind colors are that kind of variable? So you have to go back, like you have to go through a bit of a loop here where you have the raw colors. The raw colors map to a hex value, but the raw colors also map, and that's why I added this mapping here, to a value in OKLCH. So I should probably add like a header here, right? So this is the hex, this is the OKLCH value, and this is the color name. So if I add this, and I will maybe do it proper, and then use the foreground variable in this case to make it a bit nicer. So here I will use that one and that one too. I will call this hex, and I will call this LCH value. And maybe drag this out a little bit so it looks better. So this mapping is incomplete. So I'll make a to-do, make mapping more complete. And I happen to know that there are like a few mistakes inside of the kit, right? We have the charts here, for example, they don't have the right variable logic yet for dark mode. So this is something that we still need to fix. But I'm a bit confused there because it seems like those like colorful charts were removed from the documentation. So if we go to charts here, for example, it's all like blue charts, and you can change the theme to amber and it becomes like an amber chart. So I'm not sure what happened to like those other charts. But for example, for a pie chart, I really don't like that it's like all colors. That's just really bad UX to have like the same color. Like if you have to describe this pie chart to someone, it would be like, oh yeah, the mid-orange slice. Like that doesn't make any sense from a UX perspective. I think it looks pretty, but it has so much UX problems. So basically, I guess what we should do to accord with shadcn is make all the charts blue and then have like a chart theme that you can maybe choose from. But I'm not sure. I guess that's the way that the framework is going. So in general, I think that's kind of it. There's a lot of, I have to explain another thing, which is like, why are there more variables in Figma than in shadcn itself? So this is explained here. It says we added several variables on top of shadcn UI's theming to allow designers to have more control in Figma. Within shadcn's code, the color mix function is often used to mix a variable with a color. This is not possible to replicate inside of Figma. Within other parts of the code, color variables are hard-coded instead of using a theming layer. This forces us to invent new variables for these cases. So just going around the code, you will see that there are, I'll just go into some random code, right? Maybe this is a bad example because the image goes on top of the UI element, so we cannot make the point. Okay, so we're opening the drawer here, and here we see a bug in shadcn where the dark mode doesn't show like the right variables. But if we go and inspect like all of these things, some of them are using like this uses, for example, text muted foreground. So this is like an official usage of a variable. But what you also have is that often there's like no usage of the variable. I'll try to explain myself. So if we look at this button, for example, and if we look at this horrible code from Tailwind, we see that the dark uses the border input variable. Okay, so we can spot that there's a BG input variable as well, but then they put like a /50 on it. So it means that it's the BG input variable, but like halved. And then that means that inside of Figma, for such a case to be like fully accurate, we would need a way to put like the BG variable 50 in from the input. So bear with me. We have input here, and then we would have to duplicate a variable. For example, we would do like divided by 2 or input 50. Like we would have to come up with a name, and we would have to make it like half the lightness. And I don't even know if half the lightness of 800, like what color that is, because it's not just 400. Half the lightness of 800 also has like an opacity aspect inside of it. So this /50 might make it like 50% opacity. So we could do like an input 50% opacity, where we're like, okay, we take the value of neutral to 100, but then that's not technically possible inside of Figma. Like I can do this, and I can do 50%, but now I don't have a mapping to my Tailwind variable anymore. So some of the cases that you will find are a bit annoying. And what I've chosen to do is to avoid most of those cases. You will see sometimes opacity is being used with white and black, but I've tried to keep the variables clean and mostly mapped to the Tailwind colors. And this means that sometimes there are inconsistencies versus like how shadcn is coded. Because if we would have to make variables for all these little cases, then that would mean that we just end up with a lot more variables. But if we really analyze this, what we have here is a hover state on a button, and the button is kind of in the outline style. So if we look at the button in the outline style, we do have that logic going on. Like if you have an outline here, you have a default and it gets slightly brighter when we select it. But now that I look at it, I don't love how, for example, here you see the border more clearly, but then if you hover over it, you wouldn't see the border more clearly. So we can still fix that, I think, by having another border going on here. And this uses a step-up system. So the border is like, it maps to neutral 200. But what if we want another border that's maybe a bit darker or lighter? In this case, we would want not a darker border. I think we would want a lighter border. So if we change it to border 3, we're fixing that here. I think this one would, with the focus ring around it, would actually look better with border 4. But let me just check with border 3 first. So border 3, you don't even see the border, but with border 4, you see the border. Okay. And then you will like check against shadcn. So in shadcn, actually that problem occurs where you don't see the border. So that's then, let's say, a bug in shadcn. Should we then replicate this bug, or should we like keep it nice like this, that you can actually see the border? I think sometimes we go ahead and make it nicer than the development implementation, because this way we show the way forward to make it look better. So let's see if we should apply this to the other one. I don't think so. So I think that's a good example of how the step-up system works with the accents. Now, I want to make it clear to people, like when they encounter this list, what they see is essentially the list that's in theming. So I want to make it clear that like they see this list. Let's just put them side by side just to make that more clear. And the list is basically what they see, right? Background, foreground. Then the card is actually missing here in the alphabetical list, and popover is also missing because they are like we put them somewhere else. Card and popover, we put them in another category, but maybe we shouldn't. But these are like, this list keeps going. Like maybe I will make use of this video and order it the way that it's ordered inside of this list. So primary foreground, secondary foreground. We have muted foreground. We have accent foreground. Then we have destructive, border, input, and ring. So border goes in front of input. But the thing is that we also have a bunch of unofficial variables. And all of these are used to simulate things that happen inside of the code, but that are not mapped to the variables, or that sometimes use calculations inside of CSS to then be able to do the same thing inside of Figma, or at least simulate it. And what's important to know for anyone working on the theming layer of the kit is this 0, 2, 3, 0, 1, 3, 4, 5. So you would think like, why does it jump from accent 0 to accent 2 to accent 3? Why does it jump from border 0 to 1, 3, 4, 5? The reason is that this is an unofficial logic, and this is an official logic. So the official logic jumps between 100 and 900 from light to dark. And what this adds is one that jumps from 50 to 950, one that jumps from, well, I'm explaining accent. So accent 100 to 900. So the other accents you would need is 50 to 950, 200 to 800, 300 to 700. And for border, the official one actually maps to 200. So 200, and the other way around is 800. So what you have for border is 100, 900, 300, 700, 400, 600, 500, 500. Now, what you see in practice is that you have to apply like one of the styles to make it logical. So let's find something with a border. So here we have the sonner component. So let's go into the sonner and we show a toast. And we see that actually there's an error versus the framework, like it's not using the correct card backgrounds. So let's first go in and fix that. So it's using the general background, but actually we want to use the card here. So I'm gonna map the card here. I'm just gonna do that very quickly. But then we have this border, right? And we look closely at the border. We also look closely at the border here. I think that might be accurate. I would have to check the code to be 100% sure. And then we have our examples here. We have, like, that's good. Like the border seems accurate. So let's go on and find something with another border. It might just be that every example that I have, the border will be accurate. But here I'm using, for example, unofficial border. I'm using border 3. So let's go to this component called command and let's check it out. So once again, we see that the card background is not being used correctly. So let's use the card background. And then it seems like we also have a problem where every one of those items is actually black in the regular state, but it shouldn't be. So I don't like to attach like card here because that's not a real background. So let's use accent. So accents makes it look better. Let's see. Regular, default, state, default. This is the hover state on one of them. And the regular state would have to be the same thing as the background, which is neutral 200 for the card, or the card is actually neutral 900. So the background would then map to which background? So I don't even know. So I have to look it up. So we go to the backgrounds and we look okay, the cards, let's look at the card first. The card is neutral 900. So which background is neutral 900? It turns out that it's probably accent. Okay. So we do use accent for the sonor component. So I'm going to go ahead and change this into a menu item that uses accent. So this is also a bit confusing because here we're doing an override on top of a menu item. So maybe the problem is in the menu items themselves. Maybe a menu item by default has an access color. So let's go ahead and check that out. So let's see the menu. So any menu, for example, seems to have this kind of different color in the background. Even the general background color of our user interface here, it seems to be lighter here. So instead of using the general background, we should maybe choose the accent background, but that one seems to be a bit too too much. So I think accent 0 is actually the one we want. So I'm gonna put accent 0, and that's the one that seems to be exactly the same color. So all the general backgrounds that are tied to this kind of documentation, to check it against the documentation, we need to change all of them to an accent 0 background. Okay, so that's gonna be some work, right? So I'm not gonna do that in the video. I'm just gonna try and remember that. But then we're going back to the select, for example. And if I look at the select, I see that we're also using the general background here, but it looks to be slightly brighter versus the background. So I think it uses neutral 900 or neutral 900 in the dark mode. So these are all too black at the moment. So we need to change them to look more like the documentation. So it's clear that there's still a process that we have to go through where I think at the moment everything looks a bit too dark, and we have to map that once again, especially the inputs to the right colors. So I'm gonna end the video here, but this gives you some background information about what I'm going for and what I'm working through. And if you can help with anything, I would love it.